I'm Dr. David Hill. Today I want to visit with you for just a few moments about first aid for the skin. One of the reasons why I'd like to do that is because each of us sooner or later are going to deal with these types of conditions, either because we have children or grandchildren. Maybe you're as clumsy as I am. That could be something minor like a scrape or a cut. Sometimes that can be more serious, and we have different types of infections and irritations. And for this reason, I would like to focus for a few minutes on some of the properties that are associated with many different essential oils. Now, we love the chemistry of essential oils, and today I'm not going to go into a lot of detail talking about all of that chemistry, but rather want to introduce to you a concept of the properties that we find in essential oils, the compounds that exist there. Many of them are very soothing and very calming to the skin. So we're going to talk about 4 very specific circumstances with the skin that we might deal with, and I'd like to give you some ideas of some things that you can do that are all relatively easy but very effective. One of the first things I'd like to introduce to you is a model of prevention. Now this is good, and in a previous webinar I spoke with you a little bit about the doTERRA skincare line and the value that comes from just making sure that our skin is healthy. In this model of first aid, however, we want to look at acute injury and acute circumstances. Maybe it's what we discussed earlier, that you have a burn or you have a bite. And while I recognize that many essential oils are effective in these categories, I would like to isolate my comments today to only talk about 2 essential oils as it deals with acute injury. Part of the reason why is that these oils are very economical, but they're also very easy to use and to understand. So the first oil I'd like to introduce to you is lavender. Now the reason why lavender is so effective for any type of a skin condition is because it's primarily composed of alcohols and esters. Now alcohols and esters are both calming and very soothing to the skin. Because of the alcohols, for example, lavender is also strongly anti-infectious, and it can help to reduce and control inflammatory responses that we'll see secondary to some type of an acute injury or circumstance. We also have this benefit because of the esters. It's very calming, but we have analgesic type effects, so it helps to reduce some of the discomfort that we see. I like lavender because lavender is mild enough to be applied topically to any type of skin condition, even with very young children, which quite frankly is where most of the time we see the need for first aid with the skin. Now another oil I'd like to talk with you about is tea tree oil. Now specifically this is Melaleuca alternifolia. It possesses very similar properties that we see in the essential oil of lavender, but we have monoterpenes and sesquiterpenes as classes of compounds. That means that it is very effective for reducing the likelihood of an infection, and because of that's due to the monoterpenes, and the sesquiterpenes, it means that it's very calming and very, very soothing to the skin. Now both lavender and Melaleuca tea tree oil have this very rich history and are non-irritating in any way to the skin. So I like this combination, and then I would encourage you to think about this combination of lavender and the tea tree oil anytime you have some type of a topical injury or irritation. Safe to use for the entire family. Now the third circumstance we want to look at is conditions that become more chronic, or what we would call in general conditions of the skin, things like eczema and psoriasis and acne as an example. Now I want to introduce something to you that a lot of times we don't think of when we start thinking about conditions associated with the skin. We always have this tendency that we want to pin something directly or tie something directly to an event or to a specific circumstance. But I think we underestimate something that is very important when it comes to our skin, and that's that there's this strong connection that exists between skin conditions and dietary factors. Let me give you a quick example of what I mean. There are 2 distinct types of aging that is associated with our skin. The first is what we would call more intrinsic factors. These are genetic type factors that, although we all have some genetic predisposition for aging and even for disease and illness, I suppose, we can actually control how quickly they manifest or whether or not they even do manifest through proper nutrition. So lifestyle choices really make a big difference. That's intrinsic factors, what's happening inside of our body. Then we have extrinsic factors. Now, I'm not trying to pick on any specific thing, but I'm going to use smoking as an example. One of the issues with smoking is that the nicotine causes a narrowing of the blood vessels in the outermost layers of your skin. This impairs blood flow. And when we have a decrease in oxygen and important nutrients being delivered through the blood, we can have damage that ensues. So our skin begins to wrinkle prematurely. All of this suggests that our skin is not healthy. So I want to help you understand that part of the way that our body heals very quickly, part of the ways that we can overcome damage to our skin, is to make sure that our skin is resilient. And earlier we talked about using a skincare system as a model of prevention. I think nutrition provides the exact same thing for us. So when we think about skin conditions, things like eczema and psoriasis and even acne, I want you to think about some very specific things. And although today I'm not going to talk about all the research that would support this, I want you to know that you should be concerned with a lack of fatty acids, a lack of vitamins and minerals, and even trace minerals becomes important in that mix, a lack of enzymes, models of inflammation that develop within the skin, and even candida overgrowth. Now, there's a lot of ways that you can address this specifically, and I would encourage you to consider using the Lifelong Vitality, which will help you to overcome most of these circumstances. A lack of enzymes can be dealt with the Terrazyme. This is a product that you can take each time you eat your meal. And candida overgrowth has certainly been well addressed with the GX Assist and the PB Assist. So if you're dealing with some type of a skin condition that's not necessarily acute but has become chronic in its manifestation, you might want to consider some of these other factors that I'm sure that we'll discuss at a point in the future. Now, I'd also like to discuss with you the very last condition that I want to speak about regarding your skin and dealing with this first aid environment, and that would be, how do we restore? How do we help the skin to begin to promote and develop correctly when it's healing? And we're going to use the Immortelle Anti-Aging Blend, and I want to spend just a few quick moments talking about this very specifically. There are some specific things that we see when we use the Immortelle blend. We know, for example, that we're going to reduce the damage that can come from sun exposure, UV exposure. We know that we're going to promote skin renewal, and this is all because of the essential oils that are in this blend. We're going to support inflammatory reduction in the body. We're going to balance the natural moisturizer levels, and like the properties we've already discussed, this is a blend that's very soothing and calming. Now, it's easy to see damage as we get a little bit older, and this is a very interesting photo to me because we're seeing on the far right hand side here all of the UV exposure. Now, this is under ultraviolet exposure, so we see all of the sun damage that has occurred, which is somewhat apparent when we look to the far left and see the normal photograph. What's significant here is that as we get older, we expect to see some of that, but we're seeing this in younger and younger children all of the time, which means that this is something that's important for each one of us to begin to consider. How do we help the skin to be more resilient? This is part of the reason why the Immortelle blend will be very beneficial for you. Now, we're really going to categorize this into two things, that we have these inflammatory responses, but then we have this damage that ensues other ways, in which we usually see with some type of a dark spot that begins to appear on the skin. And we can effectively manage each of those if we'll look at the essential oils that are in the Immortelle blend. Now, what I'm recommending is that you use the Immortelle as a roll-on and you address problem areas with the skin very specifically by just applying it topically. The oils that we see in the Immortelle are remarkable. frankincense, sandalwood, lavender, myrrh, helichrysum, and rose. Each one of these essential oils is significant for its healing properties and protective properties regarding the skin. So let me spend just a minute and talk with you, give you a few of the highlights. Now we think about benefits that come from frankincense essential oil, and it's further reaching than what we see with the skin. But for the purposes of our discussion today, I'm going to concentrate only on the benefits we can see from using frankincense in the Immortelle blend. Frankincense, we know, helps to reduce the appearance of scarring. We know that it's antiphlogistic, or it helps to reduce inflammation. We know that it's cytophylactic, which means that it helps to regenerate or produce new cells, proper cellular production and turnover. It has antiseptic properties, and it also has very powerful astringent properties. Now we also have sandalwood, which is very similar in its properties to frankincense, in that it also can help to reduce scarring and help to limit inflammatory responses. We know that it has antiseptic and astringent properties, just like the frankincense essential oil does, but this is significant because it helps to even skin tone. A lot of research now talking about these type of qualities that are coming from the essential oils, these properties that are demonstrated when we use the oils. So we can have a reduction of things like age spots. Lavender, which we already talked about for using in any type of an acute circumstance, we could use lavender. It, like frankincense, induces the proper healing of the skin. We know that it helps to reduce inflammatory responses in the skin. It's calming and it's very soothing because of the alcohols and the esters. We have this great antiseptic property associated with it, so we reduce the probability of any type of an infection. And it's cytophylactic, just like what we saw in frankincense. In other words, it helps with proper cellular turnover and rejuvenation. Now, much of the damage that we see to skin is secondary to some type of damage that occurs at the DNA. And I don't want to have a detailed discussion about how DNA functions in your body, but to drive this point home with frankincense and with lavender, I want to share with you that there's been a significant amount of research on frankincense, sandalwood, and lavender, the first three oils that we've talked about here in the Immortelle blend, that it can prevent and reverse damage to the cellular DNA. What that means is that your skin becomes more resilient. Your skin has a greater ability to heal properly, especially after it's been damaged. Now, I want to talk about myrrh, and you'll notice that each one of these essential oils has very similar properties. Myrrh is rejuvenating to the skin. It's antiphlogistic, which we determined earlier helps to reduce inflammatory responses in the body. It's astringent. It balances hydration, and it has cicatricial properties. In other words, it helps to form proper scarring. It helps the skin to heal, but reduces and minimizes the appearance of that scarring as it occurs on the skin. So those cicatricial properties are very, very important. Helichrysum, which many people are very familiar with, very similar properties again. Now, one of the reasons why I like helichrysum is because nearly half of the compounds that we find in helichrysum are sesquiterpenes. Anytime you hear the word sesquiterpene, I want you to associate it with reduced inflammation. And so it's important that we use helichrysum in this blend because of its high content of sesquiterpenes. Now this, like many of the oils we've already talked about, helps to reduce the appearance of scarring. It's not always just about helping the skin to heal. We want it to heal properly. And one of the properties that we see in helichrysum is that it improves microcirculation. And anytime we improve nutrient density to skin, especially where it's healing, we have a more proper and a more thorough healing process that can ensue. So helichrysum is a very significant attribute in this blend. Now lastly, let me just highlight for a minute and talk about rose essential oil. Rose has a very rich history, and there's many, many properties associated with rose. Rose is difficult to source effectively, and when I say effectively, I mean for its purity and for its potency, but we've effectively done that. And now we see very powerful benefits that can come in the way of healing for the skin. So antiphlogistic, remember we said it possesses this ability to reduce inflammation. Antiseptic, antiviral, many of the oils we've talked about, we haven't talked about in the context of their antimicrobial properties, but each of the essential oils in the Immortelle blend actually are antibacterial, antimicrobial, so we would include viral type infections in that, bactericidal, which we just referred to. But one of the things that I really like about rose essential oil, and it's oftentimes used in skincare as each of these oils are, because it promotes normal scar tissue to form, just like what we talked about with helichrysum. In other words, your skin heals much faster. We have emollient and hydrating properties that we saw identified in a few of the other oils that we've talked about already. And so when we use the Immortelle blend, we get this ability to have a more youthful complexion, and we fight aging in general. But when we use it daily, we enhance and promote beautiful and healthy skin. Now, this is intended to be a part of our skincare system that we talked about, but I would like you to begin to think about it for the healing properties that are associated with this essential oil blend, especially when we have some type of an acute circumstance or an injury that has developed. Many of the essential oils offer benefits, and the challenge comes not in deciding whether or not they could be beneficial, but whether or not we're going to use them and how we would use them. And so I've chosen oils that are all soothing and non-irritating to the skin in the form of the Immortelle blend and lavender and melaleuca, or the tea tree oil. I would invite you to explore the value and benefit that can come from those essential oils, especially when we have some type of an injury. I look forward to visiting with you again in the very near future.